everybody, and welcome to this Out of This World episode of Top Deck Fox. For this episode, we are actually going to talk about my top 20, well, technically top 10, I'll explain why in a minute, cards from the upcoming Silver Border set, Unfinity. Now, for those who don't know, the unsets in general are kind of like casual, jokey sets. They usually like to make fun of themselves. They usually have a lot of in-game references and such, and just obscure humor and such. It's mostly there just for the sake of
comedy.
And even doing some silly shenanigans like throwing your card around to essentially try to hit a card, or even do something like flip essentially your card to see if it can go over a few cards so you can get a counter boost. That's the silliness we're expecting in an unset. However, there is actually a twist this time around with this set. This is actually going to be the first unset that's going to have both silver border cards, which this time around, unfortunately, the silver border had to be cut out and represented by acorn holofoil, as well as a combination of black border cards. Now, for those who don't know, when a card is silver bordered, or in this case, acorn, this means that it's only legal within casual formats, or honestly just rule 0 with Commander as long as you just talk to your command group. Trust me, a lot of people would be okay with it if I'm being quite frankly honest with you, as long as you explain what you're doing. As well as black border cards, which, for those who don't know, with this set, that means that they're going to be illegal for Eternal formats. In this case, it's going to be legal for Legacy, Vintage, and of course, Commander. So for this one, we're actually going to do the top 20, but in this case, it's going to be top 10. The top 10 silver cards that I love from the upcoming Unfinity set, as well as the top 10 black border cards coming from the Unfinity set. I thought that would be kind of like a nice little gimmick, and it would not result my editor having to make number 20, number 19, number 18, number 17, you know, stuff like that. Granted, I don't know, maybe Crow already had that in advance.
I did not.
Did you have that already in advance, Crow, or you're just grateful that's now in the expanse of the top 10 stuff? Okay. Well, I guess that's my editor's take. Nevertheless, let's do some silly shenanigans and talk about my top cards from the Carnival of Spectacular Madness that is Unfinity.
Number 10.
First off, we start with my number 10 silver border card. I'm just going to say silver border, even though technically they're acorn, just for the rest of this video, just for the record. Anyway, my top 10 silver border card is The Greatest Show in the Multiverse. A 7-mana artifact enchantment saga, aka pretty much Termagorphus looking at this and being like, hey, I get 2 power and toughness from this.
Nice.
Nevertheless, it's a 7-mana saga that has as an additional cost to cast a spell. You exile 5 instant and or sorcery cards you own. So in this case, you can actually get them from outside the game rather than the sideboard, for the record. You own with the same artist and different names from outside the game. And then pretty much step 1 through 3 for the saga is you will choose one of those exiled spells at random and cast it for the low price of free. Now, personally, I just love this card because it does have the fun. Usually in unsets, they usually have these times where they do like Artist Matter card designs and such. You see this in stuff like Squirrel Farm and such. And I do think this is a nice spin on it because it kind of does a... You know, kind of like how people do the 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon type of game in that sense? Okay, you see where I'm going with this. Well, it's one of those scenes where the fun challenge with this one is you can actually just essentially choose like maybe one card you like. Like, let's say if I decided to draft this and I wanted to have, say, for example, Booster Tutor in this quote-unquote exile card pool. Well, I can look at the artist, which in this case is Heather Hudson, and actually look at all the art that Heather Hudson's done and try to find a good collection that would be kind of nice to do within a limited draft pool. I even actually posted the results on Twitter, and hey, it turns out Heather Hudson actually has some great spells for the limited format. And you can do that with a variety of other artists. Riley Beckett, the list can go on and on. John Avon, maybe even, though I don't know. Does John Avon only do lands? I could be wrong on that. Nevertheless, it's safe to say you'll have some fun trying to think of what's the best 5-card combo when you try to do your own show of the greatest show in the multiverse. Now, my number 10 silver border card, and we actually get to one of the new mechanics within this Unfinity set, which is attractions. Now, for those who don't know what attractions are, I'll explain it real quick. It's basically a variation of contraptions, but kind of like with a theme park twist to it. So the basic premise is there's these artifacts called attractions. You have your own attraction side deck, and then what happens is you essentially will play a card that says it's symbol attraction, or essentially open an attraction. You reveal the top card from your attraction deck, put it on the battlefield, it's an artifact, and then also with the attraction card, they will have numbers highlighted. So the basic premise is at the beginning of your upkeep, if you open an attraction, you will roll 1d6, and whatever roll you get essentially will determine which attractions you will visit. So for example, if you roll 6, all attraction cards are highlighted with 6, you will visit all the attractions that have 6 highlighted. Or, like, for example, if you roll 1, no attraction card is highlighted with 1, so you will not visit any attractions, and it goes on from here and there. Nevertheless, I wanted to start off with Storybook Ride because out of all the attractions, this one seems to be the strongest of the bunch. Though maybe the card draw one, Info Booth, is probably the close second. Nevertheless, what you do is once you visit this attraction, which you do this at the beginning of your upkeep, keep that in mind, you exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of attractions you visited this turn, including this one. And you may play those cards this turn. And at the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, then you just put them on the bottom of your library in any order. This card is just really silly because I just can think of this as for many, like, commander cards that essentially like to play with cards with exile. Like the one I can think of right off the top of my brain is like Prosper, essentially. Hey, I'm gonna exile some spells and play them and get treasures. Sweet. This can look for a bunch of cast spells from exile, cast spells from unaware, then hand, essentially commanders, as well as just other cards that synergize with this exile mechanic. And at the end of the day, it's really good card draw if you're playing a heavy attraction deck. Like, if you can get multiple attractions out, this could be like at the beginning of your upkeep, exile 5, exile 10 cards. Like, it can get really silly really quick in the right deck. So nevertheless, that's why Storybook Ride is my number 10 black border card from Unfinity. Number 9 on the silver border cards from Unfinity is the Icing Manipulator. Now, this one is pretty simple why this is on the list. This just has a really silly, unique mechanic of making your 1/1 counters be also food tokens. Now, some people, when they were looking at this card, they were like, wait, why is this silver bordered? Just trust me on this one, this is a reason why this is silver bordered, especially when you consider stuff like Doubling Season and a lot of other ways that you can break this card in half within Eternal formats. Still, in a nice casual kind of like food matter counter synergy deck, you might try to essentially talk to people and be like, look, I'm not going to do the Doubling Season shenanigans, I'm not going to do those shenanigans, but I do like this kind of like flavorful counters as my food and such, and just getting the icing off the mechanic. A lot of playgroups will probably be okay with that. I just love the flavor. I do love that it's kind of a callback to Icing Manipulator from Dominaria and older sets. That's just hilarious. And it's also a pretty powerful card. Just making your counters into food tokens can be pretty relevant if you need to get some life gain. And being able to have that activated ability to roll 2 6-sided dice, and then for each odd results, just put a +1/+1 counter. Which in this case, just saying create 2 food, up to 1 or 2 food tokens. That's pretty good. So, in this case, Icing Manipulator is my number 9 silver border card. Which leads to my number 9 black border card being Priority Boarding. A free mana enchantment, which is whenever you roll a die, you may reveal the top card of your library. Do this only once each turn. Whenever you reveal a card with mana value less than the result this way, you may exile. If you do, you may play it this turn. Now, this one is relatively balanced within the draft format here, mostly because you are only rolling d6s within this, other than some very obscure circumstances. But yeah, a majority of this draft set, you are rolling d6s, so As long as you don't, like, go over your mana spells being, like, 8 or such, you should be fine with this card in draft. But the reason why it's on this list is obviously for one really specific reason in Commander. Thanks to Adventures in Forgotten Realms, as well as essentially the Battles for Baldur's Gates, all the Dungeon Dragon sets, they have cards that roll d20s. So this one, where while in draft it might not be consistent when you try to essentially get essentially what basically amounts to a card draw from this enchantment, with a d20, it's going to be a lot easier. And there's a lot of dice rolling commanders, like I'm thinking of the Dragon Barbarian right off the top of my brain, that would love this card as a semi-impulsive draw, especially if they have any of the d20 rolling mechanics. Heck, you don't even have to be a dice rolling deck if you just have a proportion of dice rolling cards within your deck design. Like, let's say you're running that whole Baldur's Gate Mythic Dragon cycle that just rolls d20s, you might want to consider playing Priority Boarding. And with that, that's why Priority Boarding is my number 9th card on the list.
Number 8.
My number 8 Silver Border card on this list, it had to be Carnival Barker. I mean, do I have to explain myself with this one? It's literally a good boy doggo employee that allows you once a game to essentially help hype up your cards so you can give it a big toughness boost and a trample and haste boost. It's essentially a one-targeted Craterhoof behemoth that its power level is going to be determined by how you can essentially praise your card. Go, Timbergoy, go! You are the best, hugest boy ever. Go and just look at all the deer it's chasing. It's chasing all those deer so magnificently. Look at its bright teeth. Oh, take a look at all the applause, Okay, I now get plus 10 in trample and haste. But yes, but let's be frank, it's just a good boy, and it's just a good pun. Carnival Barker, I mean, come on, why can't... I mean, seriously. It's not even going to be the only dog on this list. It's just great that we have a good boy. Or a good girl. I actually don't know the gender of this dog, but still. Anyway, nevertheless, my number 8 Black Border card on the list is Space Berylin. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. There was a lot of discourse about this card because essentially a lot of people were a little bit scared about the Space Sculptor ability. Which, for those who don't know, once Space Berylin is on the battlefield, it divides the battlefield into Alpha, Beta, and Gamma sectors. So basically what it amounts to is it separates your board into essentially 3 sectors. And then you determine which creatures you're going to put in each sector. The opponents will choose first, and then you choose second. Honestly, I kind of want to jokingly say that essentially what this card does just makes you play the Skyrim digital card game.
You're finally awake.
Which I would be surprised if actually people remember that game exists. That's beside the point, though. Nevertheless, I do think this card is actually kind of like a fun mechanic to play in Limited, and while I can understand the concern in Commander, this can just be as easily solved as just essentially getting free pins or free stuff, just have the dividers and such, and just hope you don't play this card against like a person who has a really go-wide token deck. Still, I do love the abilities on this, just being able to make one of your creatures, or even a portion of your creatures, unblockable. Putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature of a sector of your choice can have a interesting politic matters shenanigans on it. And the -5 just being a board wipe to destroy some certain problematic creatures, that can be very relevant. And that is why Space Berylin, seriously, it's just Space Chase. Space Chase is my number 8 on the list.
Number 7.
Number 7 on this list is actually a pretty fun Silver Border card, which in this case is Urza's Funhouse. Now, firstly, obviously, this is obviously a pretty much a joke on Tron, but it is actually kind of a fun card, especially since it is actually possible to do this in draft. No, we don't have the Tron lands in draft. I mean, technically we do, but we actually got the land Nearby Planet, which is also has Rangeling, which gives it all land types, which is also including, specifically, the Tron lands. So you can actually do the infinite mana shenanigans in draft. Actually, I was just watching the Loading Ready Run pre-release for this set, and they actually were able to do that. With also another spell on the list that I don't want to spoil, but you can do some fun shenanigans with infinite mana. I think the one you can do in draft is infinite mana into Clown card, which... that's a lot of clowns. That's a lot of clowns. But still, nevertheless, you can also just take advantage of this land for its activated ability, which is to head to the AskUrza.com and click Urza's Funhouse. Which, for those who don't know what that does, that essentially just gives you a random Planeswalker ability to activate during the turn. So, pretty much a fun kind of like take on the Urza Tron shenanigans, but also can just be fun whether if you're going to do the infinite mana shenanigans, or if you just want to get a random Planeswalker ability in a pinch. Now, the number 7 black border card is, well, it's a goblin, but what the goblin's name is by your determination. It is the Blink Goblin. Now, I was initially not pretty much high on this card, but after a lot of talk on it with people who play Legacy and Vintage on Twitter, I kind of came around to this card. Now, for those who don't know, this card specifically has the sticker mechanic, another new mechanic within the set. The basic premise is there's going to be cards within the set that allow you to put stickers on things, and essentially sometimes you even generate tickets, which in those tickets can help pay to essentially put specific ability as well as power toughness stickers on your non-land permanents that you own. Note own, not control. So you can't be cheeky and after treating someone's, like, I don't know, expensive Termagoyf and then just put a fedora on it. So, no, you cannot do that. It has to be cards you own. Still, the power of this card is specifically with its ETB, which is when this enters the battlefield, you will put a name sticker on it, so you can name it with the variety of name stickers from getting an Unfinity, and then you add 1 red mana for each unique vowel on that sticker. And after some of the community had essentially did some hard math on it, it turns out that this card can range from being, even with the 10 randomized sticker sheets you get, can, at least at a high percentage of the time... Wow, I'm having word jumble soup with this one. Anyway, for a high percentage of the time, can essentially either pay for itself, get you 2 mana, or even can get you upwards to 6 mana. That is very silly, to even the point that this is even being considered in Legacy Goblins. I want to repeat that again for you. Blank Goblin is actually being considered for Legacy Goblins. Yeah, that actually has the potential to be a silly card with that being the circumstance. Plus, also, with all the stickers, you can just give it funny names. You can make it a Phyrexian Goblin. You could even make it a Dark Goblin. You could even make it a Mind Goblin, which there is a portion of the audience that's just pretty much snickling at that one. Why? Well, I'll let you research the internet and figure that one out. Nevertheless, number 7th on my list, the black border cards from Unfinity, it had to be the Blank Goblin, but I'm always going to know it as the Mind Goblin.
Number 6.
Number 6 on my list for silver border cards would be the Animate Graveyard. Obviously a take on Animated Dead, but a basic premise. In this case, instead of getting a creature from the graveyard is your creature. Specifically, you're going to enchant your graveyard. Now, for the first time, this is just a take of actually on a unstable card, which is Animate Library. And I initially did not thought much about that card because Animated Library, for those who don't know, essentially just made your whole library, which while made it a really, really big vanilla creature, it still was stats at the end of the day. However, I had to reread this card again to actually make it go on my list because it turns out it does more than just that. Animated Graveyard not only gets the toughness and power of the number of cards in your graveyard, but also gets all the essentially abilities and text boxes of all creature cards in your graveyard. So if you have, say, like an infect creature in there, you have a graveyard infect creature. If you have flying, menace, and such, so you can essentially do some very funny shenanigans where you can mill some certain specific creatures and make your graveyard into one of the more scarier threats on the table. So yeah. And also, this is actually cute and limited per se, because you also have the stickers, which do change by adding abilities and text boxes and such. So you can actually get the abilities from those sticker cards if you put on other creature cards that go to the graveyard, and the anime graveyard will get those abilities. There's just a lot of cute shenanigans you can do with this card. And also some very, very scary shenanigans. I mean, in fact, enough said. Now, another scary card that was in black, that's in the black border, that's also the number 6 on my list, which is Saw in Half. Now, can you use this spell technically as removal? Yes, technically if you're in a weird kind of like combat map circumstances. But to be frank, the reason why this card is getting so much popularity within the CEDH community, as well as the EDH community in general, is the fact that you're going to destroy a majority of your stuff at pretty much when you use this spell. Because, well, you can use it to repeat either some good death triggers or good ETB triggers. For example, you can saw in half your dockside extortionist and generate a whole lot of treasures. Also, one of the more scarier ones that I can think of is like if you have a worm coil engine. Oh hey, destroy your own worm coil engine, and not only get those worm coil engine tokens, but you also will just get the tokens that you'll get from the death trigger, which from the worm coil engine as well. Oh, and those worm coil tokens will also, when they die, will generate those essentially tokens that, yeah, just the amount of value that you can use if you use this to remove one of your more value-oriented creatures is underestimated. Like, there's a lot of silly shenanigans, or actually maybe not even underestimated. There's a lot of people that have been hyping this card, even when it got first revealed at the teaser. So, yeah, number 6 on my list, Saw in Half. And be prepared to see a lot of goblins being sawed in half. Be prepared to see a lot of worm coils sawed in half. Be prepared to just see this card in general in Yarok decks. Or pretty much any decks with good ETB or even death trigger creatures, essentially. Number 5 on my list, it is the opening ceremony. As the flavor text indicate, I just love that flavor text. Still, I also love this card as well. I love it because it is one of the more unique takes on kind of like booster tutor, kind of like card designs. For those who don't know, within Silver Border, there's these cards that essentially allow you to get a booster pack from outside of the game, and essentially use it to essentially involve your current game. Like with Booster Tutor, you just essentially tutor a card from a booster. With like Summon the Pack, you essentially get all the creature cards from a booster pack and put it on the graveyard as zombies. With Opening Ceremony, you actually get a ritual, which then you use that ritual to essentially cast spells from among cards in that booster pack until end of turn. I like this card two ways. I both like it because, yes, this is kind of like a cool take on kind of like an impulse draw from the booster pack and such, and being able to use that mana to essentially be able to cast more spells from a booster pack than you usually would. But I also kind of like the ethical nature, or kind of like the good kind of like ethical design of this card. What do I mean by that? Well, essentially, this is also a card that, if you don't want to do the booster shenanigans, remember, it says you may, you could just also just use this as a 6 mana ritual, essentially, which you can discount with, like, discount spells and such, and just use it in 5-color deck designs to essentially just get rainbow real quick if you need it. I just love it for that aspect. I love the ethical design. I also like the shenanigans that this can provide, especially within that pre-release with both Urza's Fun Tower, with infinite mana, with the opening ceremony to just open a pretty much a Neon Dynasty set booster, and Cameron, well, tried to recover from the board state, but wasn't able to, but still, it was just a fun sequence of events to see that. And it definitely guaranteed that opening ceremony was going to be the number 5 card that is silver bordered on this list. Now, my number 5 black border card is Exchange of Words. This one is just a funny enchantment. Being able to exchange essentially 2 target creatures' text boxes can be relatively really fun, especially if you kind of like have a semi-vanilla creature tribal / also some powerful keyword abilities. Like, I don't know, make your big 16/16 creature and exchange the keywords with, I don't know, a Blightsteel Colossus and such. Wow, I am talking a lot about Infect here. But there's also just a bunch of fun shenanigans of making creatures have abilities that they originally not designed, especially trading them with big static creatures. You can even do this with kind of like counter-based X creatures and such, like maybe, like, let's say you have a creature that enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. Exchange with flying, you then get a big flying XX creature. There's a lot of cute shenanigans you can do with Exchange of Words. It's a cute card design, and that's why it's my number 5 black border card on the list. Number 4 on my list is actually one of the more funnier token cards we got from the set, which is Clair de Lune, Joy Sculptor. Just the ability to make your tokens into actual cards, which then can interact with the graveyard or even be shuffled back into your library, had already brought a lot of imaginative shenanigans with the Silver Border Brewers of the world and such, and the Rule Zero casual players. Like, a lot of people have been trying to think of silly shenanigans of how you can use this to win with Battle of Wits, of all things. Like, make a whole bunch of tokens, shuffle it back into your library, and then just cast Battle of Wits. There's that shenanigans. And also there is just some powerful tokens within Magic that being able to keep with them a little while longer is pretty powerful. I mean, for Pete's sake, it says in the flavor text in there, Merit Lage. Like, being able to, if your Merit Lage gets sacrificed, just, hey, it's a card, return your Merit Lage from the graveyard. Or even, there's even the cute shenanigans, like if you were playing Clair de Lune with also, like, say, the one card we were talking about with, like, Exchange of Words, you have it where you can exchange the token with essentially with, like, a really powerful ability on, like, maybe your Balloon token or something like that. Like, there's a lot of cute shenanigans you can do with Clair de Lune. And that's why it's my number 4 card on the list. Like, I just can't wait to do so many Silver Border shenanigans with the factor that your tokens become cards. And then my number 4 black border card is a goat, and it had to be the Park Bleater. This one is just a very, very powerful card if you're doing the sticker shenanigans. Because whenever another creature you own enters the battlefield, you get a ticket. This can be ridiculously silly with any token generation spell. Like, for example, just your typical Raise the Alarm, just generate 2 1/1 soldier creature tokens. Oh hey, you're gonna generate 2 tickets. Or maybe just like your X, like, oh, I don't know, like the pretty much all the X spells that create X tokens. Those X tokens now become X tickets. And then the Park Leader having the activated ability to being able to put that sticker on a creature you own that into the battlefield this turn. As long as you sequence it right, you can actually do some fun shenanigans with, like, you make like a, like, let's say Startheim Unleash, you make all those angel tokens, and then you can make your angel have, like, a silly sticker ability, or have, like, I don't know, Menace, or there's just a lot of cute shenanigans you can do with Park Leader. Yes, the activated ability does have a little bit of a timing restriction on creatures that enter on the battlefield, but you can sequence that right, and I do think Park Leader is obviously going to bleat into my number 4 position on the list. Number 3 on my list, and this one is for silver bordered, and it has to be the autograph book. I just love the flavor of this card. Just being able to essentially allows interaction with your community and such. Like, if you ever go to a convention, or if you ever go to your LGS, just getting autographs from your friends and such, and not actually influencing your game by essentially putting page counts on it, so you can just use it as kind of like a variation of Jan's Tome and such to draw cards. I just love mostly the meta game aspect of this, where it actually essentially allows you to be a nice community interaction by just getting signatures from all your friends, associates at the game store, or convention and such. This one's pretty simple, to the point. I just love the quote-unquote interaction of community that it provides by just getting one's autograph, or John Hancock, as some people would call it. And then my number 3 black border card is Tusken Whiskers. Now, is this the most broken sticker commander that we got within the set? Absolutely not. That one would be probably pretty much the reigning title of that would probably be the Simic one, which I think was like a Minister Blubberly Bloop or something like that. The editing showed over there. But mostly I just love Tusken Whiskers because it does kind of like have a cute little synergy with counters and such. Being able to essentially get stickers each turn that you activate that ability, and then essentially that interacting with the +1/+1 counter synergies. I feel like you can do some fun kind of like doubling season or even just like evolving. I always forget like branching evolution. That's the name of the card. Branching evolution shenanigans with just +1 counters and ability counters and such. Plus, there's a little bit of bias here, but come on, it's literally an elephant and mouse performer. That's adorable. So yeah, this is definitely going to be kind of like one of my more casual black border brews when the set comes out. So, number 3 in the black borders, it gotta be the elephant and the mouse. No denying that.
Number 2.
Number 2 on my list for silver bordered, and this is probably going to be one of the more chased silver border cards of the set, and that is Vorthos, Steward of Myth. Now, this one is just probably one of the more sillier, kind of like, of this gamer cycle cards they produced. But this one is just a really cool design. It allows people who knows the Magic Gathering lore, and actually just essentially, well, be their own Vorthos. Maybe make that Nicol Bolas Fiend travel deck. Make the Johnny travel deck. Like, there's a bunch of really cute ways you can design around that each spell you cast of the chosen character in its name, flavor text, or at its cost rainbow less to cast. There's a lot of cute shenanigans you can do with this. Also, by the by, one way you can actually use this, make Dragon Tribal. You would be surprised how many cards within Magic the Gathering, essentially that are famous dragon names, also have their names in other spells. Like Dramoka, Dramoka's Command, the whole Con cycle, like, you know, stuff like that. Well, technically more Dragons of Tarkir. But you would be surprised of how many famous dragons have spells named after them that you can actually use with Vorthos, Steward of Myth. So yeah, it's silver bordered, but still people are going to brew this as their commander, just to do their own take on the Vorthos storytelling shenanigans. And there's a reason why it's just number 2 on my silver bordered list. Now my number 2 black bordered card on the list is Myra the Magnificent, the head of the show. And boy, does she provide some fun synergies in this card design. So, whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, just opening attraction, that's a very powerful ability, especially if you go put this in like a storm deck shenanigans. But also, her activated ability is such a strong effect. Being able to just exile any spell from your graveyard and then just choose an attraction on it, so once you visit that attraction, you copy that spell. Like, if you can discard an extra turn spell in your graveyard, and then essentially assign an attraction to it, that can lead to some infinite shenanigans. That's all I'm just saying there. Nevertheless, though, Myra the Magnificent, you're going to provide some magnificent attractions and spell-slinging shenanigans, and that's why it's the number 2 black border card on my list. Besides, she's pretty much the whole reason this set settings exist, so she had to be on the list somewhere.
Number 1.
So now, what is my number 1 silver border card from Unfinity? Well, this one is a no-brainer the first time I saw it, and it had to be It Came from Planet Glurg. Honestly, this one is just hilarious. Now, here's the thing that people don't know about me with Commander. One of my first Commander brews was an experimental Kraj deck. I think I'm pronouncing that name right. So, I always have a kind of like soft spot for kind of like giant counter or ooze creatures with value. And It Came from Planet Glurg is essentially a giant ooze with a lot of value when you put all the mana into it. So, being able to essentially have it into the battlefield and be a copy of X different creatures on the battlefield essentially allows you to steal all their pretty much powers and toughness, all their art, all their abilities. You can do some pretty silly shenanigans. Now, granted, it is going to be dependent on your opponent's board state, But still, I can't wait to do the silliest shenanigans of making this, like, into a giant, like, abomination of, like, Prosper with, essentially, I don't know, maybe, like, Jinkatatius or Vorinclex, if someone's wanting to brew around Vorinclex. Like, the amount of combinations that this card can produce, as long as you can do the Simic shenanigans, which, let's be frank, it's Simic. Simic is always known for shenanigans. I can't wait for all the shenanigans I can do and the combinations that this card is going to be. And then, my number one black border card. All of you probably saw this one coming, but come on. I love my doggos, and it had to be Comet, the Stellar Pup. This card is just so freaking cute. The art is cute, and all of the abilities are relevant in the fact that they are varied. Just the plus, essentially, if you roll into 1 or 2, being able to chase squirrels, dogs do that constantly, that's hilarious. The, essentially, if you roll a free, being able to essentially fetch something from your graveyard, 4 or 5, just essentially, then the card, like, a lot of people want to say the dog's biting something with the, when it rolls 4 or 5, but I kind of want to imagine that the dog actually headbutts someone. Depending on your interpretation. And then number 6 is, as I like to call it, the dog doing the zoomies. But even if we take out all the flavor to bark about, hey, there is also the fact that this card is actually a very, very strong card for dice rolling deck designs. Remember, if you can consistently make it where you can roll 6, this can potentially be an infinite activated ability Planeswalker. Or at the very least, activate the ability a lot of times, which gets you both a lot of value, and also potentially a lot of activations, which means a lot of dice rolling, which if you're a deck that likes dice rolling shenanigans, you kind of see where I'm going with this. And then there's also cards that actually benefit with the factor that you can potentially make this have if you do infinite activations of this and infinitely make it go bigger and bigger and bigger. You can essentially throw a Luxior on it and make the dog have a sword, cue the Dark Souls reference here, and just make it a ridiculously big threat. Still, yeah, without a sweat, my favorite black border card from Unfinity, both in the black bordered, is Comet Stellar Pup, and within the silver bordered, it has to be It Came from Planicburg. I just love these cards. I just love this set as a whole. I can't wait to play with this set. I just can't wait to do all the shenanigans, all the silver border shenanigans, all the black border commander shenanigans. I'm even considering doing like EDH streams of silver border shenanigans because it's just fun to play with silver border cards, y'all. Nevertheless, that is my top 20, or in this case, top 10 black bordered and top 10 silver border cards from Unfinity. So, what are your personal favorites? If you have any, just write them down in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe if you like this video and you like more of these. And now, if you excuse me, I gotta finally now recovering from all the spoiler season of essentially going through 2 sets in a row, as well as just a little tease of the Brothers War. I have to actually finally get a deck tech out for Dominaria United, so wish me luck on that. Nevertheless, see y'all later. Bada beep, bada boop.